Welcome to Counterculture with Danielle D'Souza Gill. The culture's gone crazy, media's gone mad, and reason has become repugnant. Here we focus on facts and how to fight back. Tonight, we'll be talking about the threat of outside forces on our own government, including the threat of China and the decline of the dollar. In talking about corruption, people say that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Sunlight in this case refers to public knowledge and the fact that corruption relies on secrecy in order to grow. But the darkness of secrecy alone is insufficient to nurture corruption. It also needs one more element: money. So whenever Trump wanted to combat the widespread evils of the day, evils like drugs, human rights abuses, and terrorism, he didn't send his Secretary of State like every other president in U.S. history. No, he sent Mnuchin. This tactic proved brilliantly successful. By October of his first year in office, the Department of Treasury established the Terrorism Finance Targeting Center, or TFTC. This was no mere domestic bureau, but a collective of 6 Gulf state nations working with the U.S. to share information and coordinate and disrupt terrorist action across the globe. Using sanctions, Secretary Mnuchin played a key role in curtailing the actions of Russia in the Crimea and China in the U.S. This includes combating illicit trafficking in drugs by drug kingpins like Chinese national Fu Jinjing and El Pocho himself, Guatemalan Mayor Eric Salvador Zuniga Rodriguez. These actions were accomplished through threatening or leveraging economic sanctions and using alerts through FinCEN, the Treasury Department's financial crimes enforcement network. The Treasury was also instrumental in isolating North Korea and bringing Kim Jong-un to the negotiating table with the U.S. It was an unprecedented moment in history and put the Korean Peninsula on the path to reunification, something many thought impossible. The Trump administration also granted Mnuchin's department the authority to impose sanctions targeting human rights abusers around the world. While the U.S. government had always claimed the right to do so under the Global Magnitsky Act of 2012, it was President Trump who signed a memorandum in 2017 granting power to the Treasury to do so as well. The successes of this foreign policy paradigm speak for itself. The Trump administration went down in history as one of the few in the modern era that did not start a new war. Along with the administration's successes in revitalizing America's mainstream economy, Secretary Mnuchin was able to effortlessly fill the roles of not only the Treasury, but the Departments of State and Defense as well. That's a very large chunk of permanent Washington that was outed for being both incompetent and superfluous within just the first few months of the Trump administration. Trump rightly saw Americans living freely in a dynamic economy as the most underutilized yet powerful form of leverage on the world stage. He proved that you didn't need to expend American blood in order to protect America's interests, and that Ivy League diplomats skilled in protocol are far less effective than one man holding America's checkbook. This had to have irked the bureaucrats of D.C. to no end. After decades of their supposed expert leadership, our economy had been gutted and our reputation sullied. Yet it only took a few months to repair that damage and get America back on its feet. But that was not to last. The day Biden took over the White House, that same group of diplomats and corrupt bureaucrats worked as hard as they could to exacerbate the crippling of not only America's domestic economy, but its foreign influence as well. This is a damning fact pattern. It proves the failures of past administrations to safeguard the American way of life was not the result of incompetence, but of planning. Today, our economy is faltering. There are shortages of certain items, and the sight of empty shelves is becoming more commonplace in American supermarkets. Meanwhile, other staples, like eggs, have prices that are through the roof. In addition to rising gas prices, we also have the dual impact of inflation, along with shrinkflation, a phenomenon where product sizes are shrinking to help hide the impact of rising costs. Then there's the impact of our interventionism in Ukraine. Hundreds of billions of U.S. taxpayer dollars and American weapons have been shipped to the Ukrainian kleptocracy. According to investigative journalist Seymour Hersh, Ukraine is overcharging us for supplies so that Zelensky and his generals can skim their own cuts off the top. Hersh also outlines that these same generals are secretly buying diesel fuel from Russia, the very country Ukraine is fighting against. This paints an amazing picture of corruption, betrayal, and what can only be described as industrial-scale human sacrifice. And under Biden, we play an integral role. And we haven't even touched on the embarrassing reality revealed by the recent leaks from Jack Teixeira that prove the same generals sidelined by Trump's peace policies lied to Congress about the Ukrainian bloodbath and the involvement of American troops. Though our government fomented this unnecessary and pointless war, not a single establishment DC figure is willing to contemplate peace, preferring instead to squander the bulk of our economic and military resources. It's a strategy guaranteed to ensure that the end of the Ukraine war will signal to the world that America's military has been depleted, which will of course give mainland China the green light to take over Taiwan. And speaking of China, they've been capitalizing on our bureaucrats' plan to implode American influence by forging new relationships right at our front door in Latin America. Recently, the new Brazilian president has signaled his intent to abandon the US dollar in trade negotiations in favor of a new currency for the China-allied BRICS states. Brazil is certainly not the first and won't be the last to abandon the dollar. The invasive and warmongering policies of the US have already turned off Saudi Arabia and India, among other major nations. As the world abandons US currency, our country loses the ability to advocate for our interests and the American values of human rights and freedom around the world. With America effectively dethroned in the global arena, we not only become more easy to manipulate in world affairs, but we also have to face, you guessed it, even higher prices for goods and services at home. And this ultimately may be the very plan our bureaucrats have been so diligently working on for decades. Just recently, on April 10th, the International Monetary Fund unveiled its own replacement of the US dollar, the Universal Monetary Unit, or UMU. The UMU is not just a replacement of the US dollar for the purpose of trade, it's also a new digital currency, which means that it can be both tracked and manipulated at will by the powers that be. As many have warned, the implementation of a digital currency would strike a critical blow against freedom and privacy. No longer will the average person have the right to buy and sell as they please. All monetary transactions will be monitored for compliance. Compliance that could include such requirements as being vaccinated or having the right kind of political views. A global currency controlled by a small group of self-styled international banking elites who are unaccountable to any one nation or people would not only be the death knell for the concept of national sovereignty, it would usher in the perfect system of control and surveillance for every person on the planet. It would be a de facto nullification of all national constitutions, including our own Constitution. That day of total subservience is coming, if we let it.